Okay, so for my dialect project, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do my project on. And so I was looking on the list posted on Learning Suite and I saw on there Islands of Scilly. I was like, I don't know what that is, but sounds cool. So I'm doing mine on the Islands of Scilly. I don't know if you've heard of these islands before. I definitely hadn't before, but now I think it's really interesting. Yeah, so there are these beautiful islands you can see from these pictures with the ocean. And they're the most southwest point of England. They're 28 miles off of Cornwall. So a lot of the people on the islands, they are migrants from Cornwall. And actually I have some history of the Isles. Here is probably a better picture of how close the Isles are to Cornwall. Another picture, so pretty. So there were a series of governors that came to rule the islands between 1571 to 1920. And these governors, they did a lot to the islands. They improved social and economic circumstances. They introduced compulsory education. They improved infrastructure, and they even removed islanders who were not effective tenants. So they were pretty strict about the way they ruled the islands, and they helped make it better. Also, during this time, in 1867, they had a tourism boom. The main industry on the island before was fishing and farming. But now the main industry is tourism, and like obviously it's because of how beautiful these islands are. Also people go there to fish and stuff. Because there was a lot of tourism, there were a lot of dialect contacts on the island. Because of all these different people with different varieties of English coming to the islands. So there's a lot of influence there. And of course there was Cornish influence because of the close proximity to Cornwall. Yeah, so I guess the main question of my presentation is there a Scilonian dialect? Coming into this and researching this, I actually had a really hard time finding the answer to this question. There's not a lot of research done on the dialect spoken on these islands. I did find there's this one language researcher, Emma Moore. I got all my information from her because she's done a lot of research about this topic. And it's interesting because a lot of natives to the island don't think that they have a dialect. They don't see any difference between them and just regular standard English. And Emma Moore wanted to see if that was actually true, if they had a dialect or not. And so I guess what has influenced the Scilonian dialect? There's two main things that I found. One of them is Cornish influence from these migrants. And actually, there is no evidence of Cornish ever being spoken on the island, which is interesting because you think with all these migrants and how close it is to Cornwall that they would speak Cornish, but they don't. The only Cornish influence that they really had was on the place names on the island. So really the big influence on this dialect was standard English from these elite people coming to the islands by the governors. And these people usually spoke RP. So when you go to the islands, that's usually what people think that they speak is RP. Because of all these influences. So I have a recording of somebody speaking who's from the island, and this was actually really hard to find because I just couldn't find a lot of research. But this is Emma Moore interviewing a lady from the islands, and she's talking about some of the vocab specific to
me is when I first came over.
Scilly. So.
Here is Edna Goddard and Val Thomas from
This
St.
is Emma
Martin's
Moore.
talking about flower farming.
But one word that always stuck with me is when I first came over here. Time flowers, the souls and the daffs had gone, but we were doing iris at the time, and Uncle Bert, who was there now, and Auntie May. Uncle Bert came in and said, "Oh, here's another yaffle for you, maid." I thought, what on earth she brought me in now? It turned out it was an armful. But it was a yaffle, not an armful. Because it did come in as an armful, not in the basket like the souls and the daffs did.
50 sting.
Anyways, so there's a recording for you. So when it comes to phonology, Emma Moore has done 2 big research projects so far, and these were trying to decipher if there was a difference between people who were educated on the islands and people who were educated on mainland England. And because these people who were educated like in the mainland, they had all these other influences, and she wanted to see if they had similarities, which probably would have narrowed down to this Scilonian dialect that they both spoke. So one of the projects was about the split of price and mouth. Now, I'm not very good at accents, but I will try my best. On the islands, instead of saying price, they raised the A or I sound to oi, so it's price instead of price. And then the other one is mouth. This one I don't really know how to do, but instead of mouth, it's mouth. I think I'm really bad at it, sorry. But she found that they both shared that commonality. And then the other one was the bath trap split. And this one, it's honestly hard for me to even really hear a difference because I just say them the same, bath and trap. But the vowel in between, she found that mainland educated speakers, they had a lengthened vowel in there, so it's more bath instead of bath. And then people who were educated on Scilly, they it was more similar, the 2 vowels in bath and trap. Yeah, and I wish she had more research done for me to research, but she didn't, about the phonology. And then when it comes to lexicon, you guys heard in the recording her talking about this, but most of the lexicon that's unique to the islands has to do with fishing and farming, their main industries. And one of the funnest ones I saw was flower farming, which you heard her talking about. And I looked it up, and it's so cute, these old guys farming these flowers. Yeah, something I'd never heard of before, but it's something that they do on the islands. And then, yeah, here's my works cited, a bunch of stuff from Emma Moore. Yeah, I wish I had more things to pull research from, but there just isn't a lot on the internet. And basically from this, I found out that, you know, they're not really sure if there is a Scilonian dialect, but I think there definitely is. Because they do have these differences and they do have these influences from other languages. And, you know, it does sound a lot like RP, which is interesting. That's not like Cornish. Because that's what I originally thought that they would have spoke. But yeah, I hope you thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting, and that's the end.